It's Tuesday, February 10th, 2026, and we're facing a dangerous situation that's developing across the Northeast that goes far beyond just cold temperatures and snow accumulation. What meteorologists are calling snowcrete, dense, ice packed snow from Winter Storm Fern, is creating potentially life threatening conditions for millions of people. This isn't just about travel disruptions anymore. We're talking about dangerous roof loads that could lead to building collapses, treacherous sidewalk conditions that are sending people to hospitals, and a recovery situation that's being complicated by continued extreme cold, with over 71 million people still under extreme cold warnings. In the next several minutes, I'm going to break down exactly what snowcrete is, why it's so dangerous, how it's different from regular snow, and what the ongoing winter storm recovery looks like as we deal with nearly 568,000 customers still without power across multiple states. Let me start by explaining what we mean by snowcrete, because this term is showing up in National Weather Service discussions and emergency management briefings across the affected region. Snowcrete forms when regular snow gets compressed and then goes through repeated freeze-thaw cycles, creating a concrete-like consistency that's extremely dense and heavy. What makes the current situation particularly dangerous is that Winter Storm Fern dropped massive amounts of snow, over a foot in many areas from Texas to Maine, and then we've had persistent Arctic conditions that have prevented any meaningful melting. Instead, the snow has compressed under its own weight and formed this ice-packed layer that's not going anywhere anytime soon. The National Weather Service Weather Prediction Center has been tracking this situation closely, and their latest assessment shows that dangerous Arctic air masses will persist over the eastern Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast through at least today. We're still seeing wind chills as low as the -30s across interior Northeast and New England, with single digits and teens elsewhere. These temperatures mean that the snowcrete layer is not only staying in place, but it's actually getting denser and heavier as time goes on. Here's what makes this so concerning from a structural standpoint. Regular fresh snow weighs about 10 to 20 pounds per cubic foot, depending on its water content. But snowcrete can weigh anywhere from 40 to 60 pounds per cubic foot. That's 3 times heavier than regular snow. When you're talking about a foot or more of this material sitting on rooftops across the Northeast, you're looking at loads that many buildings simply weren't designed to handle, especially older structures or buildings that may have been compromised by previous weather events. Building officials across the region are issuing warnings about dangerous roof loads. In Boston, where the storm dropped 16 to 22 inches of snow according to the latest reports, structural engineers are advising property owners to carefully assess their roofs, especially flat or low-sloped roofs that don't shed snow naturally. The city has activated emergency response teams to inspect high-risk buildings, including schools, warehouses, and older commercial structures. Similar assessments are happening in New York City, where 7 to 10 inches of snow fell, and in Philadelphia, which saw similar totals. The problem is compounded by the fact that we're not done with winter weather. Current forecasts show another Alberta Clipper system developing north of Minnesota that's expected to bring additional snowfall to areas like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and then into the Northeast, where moderate to heavy snowfall is likely, especially on Tuesday and early Wednesday. If you're in New England or even near New York City, there will be some wintry precipitation, and meteorologists are concerned about what happens when you add new snow on top of the existing snowcrete layer. From a public safety perspective, the situation is creating multiple hazards beyond just the structural concerns. Emergency rooms across the Northeast are reporting increased numbers of injuries from people slipping and falling on what appears to be sidewalks and walkways, but are actually covered in this dense, slick snowcrete layer. Unlike regular snow that provides some traction, snowcrete becomes extremely slippery, especially when temperatures fluctuate just enough to create a thin glaze of ice on the surface. The power outage situation remains critical, with nearly 568,000 customers still without electricity across the hardest hit states of Tennessee, Mississippi, and Louisiana as of last night. But the Northeast is also dealing with ongoing outages, particularly in areas where the weight of snow and ice brought down power lines during the storm. Utility companies are working around the clock, but the extreme cold is making repairs dangerous and slow. Power crews are dealing with equipment that becomes brittle in sub-zero temperatures, and the persistent cold means that any exposed infrastructure is at risk of additional failures. What's particularly concerning is the long-term outlook. The Climate Prediction Center's extended forecasts show that this Arctic air mass is not going away anytime soon. We could be looking at temperatures that remain well below average for at least another week, and possibly longer. That means the Snowcrete isn't going to melt and reduce the structural loads on buildings. Instead, it's going to stay in place and potentially get even heavier as additional precipitation events occur. Transportation infrastructure is also being severely impacted by the Snowcrete conditions. Unlike regular snow that can be plowed and moved relatively easily, Snowcrete requires specialized equipment and techniques to remove. Many municipalities are finding that their standard snow removal equipment is inadequate for dealing with this dense material. Road crews are having to use heavier machinery, and in some cases, they're having to break up the Snowcrete layer before it can be moved, which is a much more time-consuming process. The aviation industry is facing ongoing challenges as well. As of this morning, over 9,600 flights traveling into, from, and within the United States have been canceled since the storm began, with more than 400 delayed. American Airlines has canceled more than 1 to 400 flights, while Delta Airlines called off over 1,200. Charlotte Douglas International Airport was among the most affected, with 545 departing flights canceled and nearly as many arriving flights called off. The problem isn't just the initial storm impacts, it's the fact that the Snowcrete conditions are making it extremely difficult to clear runways and taxiways effectively. From an emergency management perspective, cities across the Northeast have activated warming centers to deal with the ongoing extreme cold. New York City has opened warming centers in all 5 boroughs, with 2 centers per borough operating through at least Monday. The combination of power outages and extreme cold creates a particularly dangerous situation, especially for vulnerable populations including the elderly, homeless individuals, and those with medical conditions that make them more susceptible to cold-related health problems. The economic impacts of this Snowcrete situation are also becoming apparent. Businesses across the affected region are facing extended closures, not just because of travel difficulties, but because of concerns about the structural integrity of their buildings. Insurance companies are already reporting a surge in claims related to roof damage and collapses, and the total economic impact is expected to exceed the billions of dollars in damage already attributed to Winter Storm Fern itself. Looking at the meteorological pattern that created this situation, we're dealing with a displaced polar vortex combined with a weakening La Niña that has essentially opened the Arctic floodgates. This combination has allowed wave after wave of extremely cold air to pour down from Canada into the United States. The problem is that the pattern isn't showing signs of breaking down anytime soon. Long-range models suggest that the second half of February will remain active, and while temperatures may moderate slightly compared to the current sub-zero conditions, the atmosphere is likely to remain cold enough for additional significant snow events. The National Weather Service is forecasting that the dangerous Arctic air mass will persist over the eastern Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast through at least today, with lingering gusty winds leading to dangerously cold wind chills. Areas across interior Northeast and New England could see wind chills as low as -30 to -35 degrees, while other areas will experience single digits and teens, particularly through the morning hours. Recovery efforts are being hampered by these extreme conditions. FEMA has announced that federal disaster assistance is available to states like Tennessee to supplement recovery efforts, and 12 emergency declarations have been approved by President Trump, allowing states to request federal expertise and resources. However, the persistent cold and the Snowcrete conditions are making damage assessments and repair work extremely challenging. For individuals dealing with this situation, safety experts are emphasizing several key precautions. First, avoid walking or driving on areas where snowcrete may have formed, as the surface can be deceptively slippery. Second, if you're a property owner, carefully assess your roof for signs of stress, including sagging, cracking sounds, or doors and windows that suddenly become difficult to open or close. Third, if you're without power, make sure you're following proper safety procedures for alternative heating sources, as carbon monoxide poisoning remains a significant risk. The agricultural sector is also facing challenges from the snowcrete conditions. Livestock operations are dealing with extremely difficult conditions for moving feed and caring for animals. The dense snow makes it nearly impossible for animals to move freely in outdoor areas, and the weight of the snowcrete on barn roofs and other agricultural structures is creating concerns about building integrity in rural areas. Looking ahead at the forecast, the immediate concern is the Alberta Clipper system that's developing and expected to bring additional snow to areas that are already dealing with dangerous snowcrete conditions. The Weather Prediction Center is monitoring the potential for wintry mixed conditions in areas like New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, and southern New York, where even small amounts of freezing rain could add dangerous weight to existing roof loads. The bottom line is that we're dealing with a winter weather situation that goes far beyond the typical snow and cold that the Northeast experiences each year. The formation of widespread snowcrete conditions, combined with ongoing extreme cold and additional winter weather threats, creates a complex and dangerous situation that requires careful attention and appropriate precautions. This isn't just about waiting for spring to arrive. It's about safely managing a hazardous situation that could persist for weeks. Property owners need to take roof load warnings seriously and consider professional assessment of their buildings if they have any concerns. Residents need to understand that travel conditions remain dangerous, not just because of cold temperatures, but because of the deceptive and extremely slippery nature of snowcrete surfaces. And everyone needs to have emergency plans in place for potential power outages, building emergencies, and continued extreme cold conditions. Stay tuned for updates as this situation continues to evolve. We'll be monitoring the incoming Clipper system, tracking any changes in the extreme cold pattern, and following the ongoing recovery efforts across all affected states. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on, because this is a developing situation that requires close attention and frequent updates. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you in the next update.